Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to talk about the new character in Genshin Impact, Kokomi. Kokomi is a Hydro Catalyst user who can apply Hydro pretty fast, making her either an on-field enabler slash carry or an off-field support who's also a healer, and so she can fill many different roles, and I, in this video, want to show you guys how to play her and how to build her efficiently for every type of playstyle. We're going to be covering everything you need to know about Kokomi in one video, her best artifacts, weapons, teams, playstyles, and just overall tips, and I will also comment on her power level and whether or not you should pull for her in one of the first sections. With that being said, I want you guys to know that I stream most nights on Twitch, and most of my Kokomi testing was done live there, so come follow if you want to catch me live. Be sure to sub if you're new, and let's get into it. So the first thing I want to cover in this video is Kokomi's talents and how to play her. So first of all, let's look at her elemental skill. This is an ability that summons a sort of squid with a name that I cannot pronounce, and it's basically a squid that'll stay on field, dealing some damage around it and heal characters that stay close to it. The annoying part of this ability is, once again, it is a fixed sort of squid. It's like Fischl's Oz, but without being able to reposition it, so you want to be staying around it so that it can deal damage and heal you. This thing will apply Hydro honestly quite fast, like it can keep up with Shangling's Pyronado, and it can perma-freeze enemies when paired with cryo characters. The damage it deals and the healing it deals aren't really that high though. As you can see, the scaling at level 6 is 152% on every ripple, and it will regen based on your max HP. So the damage of this ability scales with your attack, whereas the healing scales off your HP. It has a duration of 12 seconds with a 20-second cooldown. However, you can effectively have 100% uptime on this with your elemental burst and one of your talents. In fact, if you use your elemental burst when your skill's still active, when the squid is still on the field, you will refresh its duration, making it effectively last for another 12 seconds, giving it 100% uptime. For your elemental burst, this is going to buff Kokomi, her normal attacks, charge attacks, and her Kurage, which is the squid, based on your max HP. Effectively, you'll gain all these scalings on your damage. So on top of your normal damage to your attacks and charge attacks, you'll also gain some damage based off of your HP. The numbers here honestly aren't that high to where her damage isn't insane, but can work as some nice bonus damage, especially in like a taser team that we'll talk about later in the video. She'll also heal on every hit and buff your Kurage, and the buff is actually pretty significant. As you can see, if I press my skill, let's say it's doing 1300 damage here, given my whatever artifacts I'm running, but if I press Q, it'll instantly start doing much more damage. As you can see, over 3k on every hit, whereas before it was doing 1300. So it is just a nice increase in your Kurage's damage. Kokomi's healing will be to all party members when you're attacking, and it does scale off her max HP. And also when you're inside your burst, you can like walk on water, which is pretty cool. Regarding your other talents, the most important one is actually this one. For some reason, Kokomi just doesn't crit. She loses a 100% decrease in crit rate, and yes, you can technically still crit if you build over 100%, but for all intents and purposes, you just do not want any crit rate or crit damage on this character. You do, however, gain 25% healing bonus from this talent, which will give you more healing, and through another passive talent, will actually give you more damage. This makes healing bonus, especially on a circlet, very important for her because you'll gain more healing and damage. And then your last passive talent decreases your stamina when you're swimming. So overall, and I will go into more detail, but Kokomi basically has two main playstyles. You can either play her as a pure support, who will give you pretty consistent Hydro application from off field with her elemental skill that you can refresh with your burst, using it purely as a skill refresh, allowing you to permafreeze enemies or enable vaporize on pyro carries or, any reaction like that, and also buffing your team with like an artifact set like Millilith, maybe Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, and also providing you with some healing. For a more active playstyle, you can also run Kokomi as a DPS or an on-field enabler, where you're spamming attacks inside of your burst, which is especially useful when you're pairing her with off-field supports like Fischl or Beto, constantly applying Hydro and enabling Electrocharge. And so in this video, we'll be covering both playstyles and how to build your Kokomi based on how you want to play her. For your talent priority, it does depend. As an on-field auto attacker, enabler, DPS, anything like that, you are going to prioritize your burst because the scalings here will increase, giving you more damage, and then your normal attacks, and then your skill at the end. If you're running her as a pure heal bot, a support who's using her skill and then swapping out, you're going to prioritize your skill first for your regeneration and damage that this gives you, and then you're going to max your burst second. Now, before I get into Kokomi's builds, I want to quickly address the elephant in the room regarding Kokomi's power level. I want to be clear that this is a character that you shouldn't pull for based on her strength because she isn't as powerful as other 5-stars that we've been getting, and so many people have found her underwhelming. So her power level in the meta overall is pretty bad. I want to say that clearly, but it's mainly because Barbara is a free unit, and Kokomi is just like a 5-star version of that with some slight advantages, mainly the fact that she can run the Tenacity of Millilith set. In case people are confused, as a baseline, as a pure support, where you don't even care about doing damage on your Kokomi, you can have fast Hydro application from off-field with your Jellyfish, Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, giving 48% attack to your carry, and the Tenacity of Millilith set, which we'll talk about later, on top of healing, despite it being low for places like floor 11. All those things give her a baseline to where she's not the worst unit in the game. She has a use and can fit many team comps because of that, but she isn't worth your primo gems since everyone has Barbara for free, and as a 5-star, she's not as good as other ones like Child or Singchu, who's a 4-star. And so my nuanced take on Kokomi is she's never really worth pulling because once again, you have Barbara, but a lot of people pull on characters they like. So I'm going to show you guys how to use her optimally if you do like her, because again, that's what's most important. I do think I'm going to make a video specifically talking about her power level, like strengths and weaknesses of her kit, but I do feel like it's my job to give you guys some information surrounding that right now, because I know a lot of people wait for this type of video before pulling for her. So with all that out of the way, let's finally talk about how to build Kokomi. Once you've decided how to play her, if you want to play her as a damage dealer from on field or as a pure support, the builds become pretty straightforward. For a support slash healer, the only set I recommend is the Tenacity of Millilith 4-piece. This is because you can maintain your skill's uptime at basically 100% if you're using your Q to refresh the duration of your skill, as I mentioned previously. The 2-piece will give you 20% HP, which increases like everything in your kit, your healing and some damage, whereas the 4-piece will be very good. It increases the shield strength of your party members, which doesn't really matter, but it also increases their attack by 20%, which is the main reason you're running this, and it can be triggered while the character's off field. That means that Kokomi's elemental skill, whenever it hits an opponent, any opponent, it'll buff the attack of all your party members, and once again, as I mentioned, this can have 100% uptime if you manage your rotations properly. This is why this is the set that I recommend as a healer. There are other viable ones like the 2-piece of this with something like Maiden's Beloved, but as a support, I think her main role is just to provide you healing, do some off-field Hydra application, and give your team this Tenacity of the Millilith buff, and also run Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, but we'll talk about that in the next section. Now, as a DPS or an on-field enabler where you want your Kokomi to be dealing damage inside of her burst, I recommend the Heart of Depth 4-piece. This is the best one overall for damage because you gain 15% Hydra damage bonus and also 30% damage to your normal attack and charge attacks after you use your elemental skill for 15 seconds. So this is the set that I recommend for Kokomi as a damage dealer, but there are other alternatives like pairing the 2-piece Heart of Depth with another 2-piece, either the 2-piece Maiden's Beloved, which gives you 15% healing effectiveness, or the 2-piece Tenacity of Millilith, which increases your HP by 20%. Lastly, while this isn't the best option, I felt like it was worth mentioning that the 4-piece Thunder Soother in a taser team where you're running her with Beta Official and constantly keeping the enemies electro charged or affected by electro, the 4-piece can be good for the 35% damage bonus, but still I would always prefer running the Heart of Depth if you have it. Okay, so with the artifact sets out of the way, I want to talk about how to actually build her main stats, what stats you want on Kokomi. First of all, keep in mind that crit is absolutely useless on Kokomi. Since you're losing 100% crit rate, you don't want to be getting pieces that have just a ton of crit rate and crit damage, since for once they're actually pretty much dead stats on this character. And so the main stats you're looking for are HP percent, energy recharge can be very nice too as a substat, attack percent can increase the damage of like your skill and some normal attacks, and elemental mastery in like a taser team, so for some specific Kokomi builds, can also be very nice. For your sands, regardless of how you're building her, you want to go for HP. This will give you the most damage and will also give you the most healing, so I basically always recommend an HP sands. But I do want to mention that as a support who doesn't get much field time, you can want more energy recharge to where an ER sands can be viable, but HP is so important on her that I tend to recommend it and going for energy recharge on your substats. That being said, you can need anywhere from 160 to 180 energy recharge when you're a pure support who's not spending much time on field, which is quite a lot and why an energy recharge sands can be viable. For your goblet, there's really two options. For damage, and when you're using her burst to auto attack inside of it, you're going to run a Hydro damage goblet. In general, Hydro damage on the goblet is what's going to give you the most damage, so it is what I tend to recommend. However, as a heal bot, someone who just wants to provide healing and won't be on field, the HP goblet will obviously give you more healing, so that's also a good option, and what I use in my Tenacity Kokomi build. Lastly, for your circlet, you basically always want healing bonus. While there can be some other viable options, healing bonus will not only give you the most healing, but it will also give you the most damage, so I just always recommend healing bonus on your circlet as it is the best option overall. All right, so now we're going to talk about Kokomi's weapons. I'm going to try to give you guys a good and detailed weapon ranking, but the first thing I want to say is Thrilling Tales is just broken. Since this weapon gives you HP percent on the stat and the effect is absolutely amazing and it's a free to play weapon, not only is it the best as a healer or off-field support, but even some teams where you're auto attacking on her like an electro charge team, if you're not running another Thrilling Tales user like Sucrose, you want to give this weapon to your Kokomi because yes, it might make her lose a bit of damage, but the HP percent stat is not only good, but you also gain 48% attack for 10 seconds to another character. And when you pair this with someone like Beto, who can snapshot this attack buff, meaning it'll last for her entire burst, it's absolutely amazing. And to clarify, with Kokomi, Thrilling Tales is a weapon you should level to 90. I know with other characters you can keep it level 1, but for Kokomi you can level it. And honestly, the damage you're dealing on Kokomi herself really isn't that much lower than other weapons. It's just slightly lower, but you make up for it with the effect that will usually give you more team damage overall. This is mainly due to the fact that Kokomi's scalings aren't as high as other characters, so even when you're auto-attacking on her, it can be more beneficial to buff your other carries. With that out of the way, I want to talk about some other weapons that are really good and that will give her more damage, especially as a DPS or if you already have a Thrilling Tales user on the team. First of all, I want to address the new 5-star that's on the rate up banner. This weapon is, designed for Kokomi, but it's really not a universal weapon. It's a weapon that if you pull for, you can literally only use it for her and no other Catalyst user really. And for Kokomi herself, it is the weapon that will give you the most damage for your Kokomi. However, Thrilling Tales is still usually better in a team for your whole team's damage, so I don't recommend pulling for this weapon at all, but you can use it if you have it. Other than that, the Skyward Atlas is also pretty good just because your damage still scales off of attack, so having a high base attack with attack percent and then that elemental damage bonus that you gain from the effect with another instance of a bit of damage is pretty nice and a good DPS weapon. For your 4-stars, they're basically all free-to-play options that are pretty good. All the ones you can make at the blacksmith, being the Mappa Mare, the Prototype Amber, and the Hakushin Ring, have their uses. Out of these, Mappa Mare will give the most damage to your Kokomi. Prototype Amber will be a more supportive weapon, giving you healing and energy. Lastly, for the Hakushin Ring, this one first of all will require that mask that you get from a quest if you want to craft it, but it is a very good weapon for taser Kokomi. It can potentially be her best weapon, not only to give her damage but also buff your team. The energy recharge main stat and then the elemental damage bonus, 10% at refinement 1 and 20% at refinement 5, is really great because whenever you trigger a reaction, so for a taser team specifically where you're spamming electrocharged, and again, if you're confused as to what a taser team is, I'll clear it up in the team comp section, but basically when you're spamming electrocharge with Beto and Fischl, giving 10 to 20% elemental damage bonus to the, both elements, Hydro and Electro, is actually really good. That being said, Thrilling Tales can still be better if you don't have another Thrilling Tales user, especially if your Hakushin Ring isn't R5, which is expensive to get. So overall, I would honestly just in general recommend you run Thrilling Tales unless you're already running someone like Sucrose who has it. I do, however, think that Hakushin Ring is very good for a taser team, and also Prototype Amber is a pretty nice option, and obviously the new 5-star is the best to give your Kokomi the most damage, but generally speaking, I do recommend Thrilling Tales. Now, constellation wise, obviously I'm C0 because I'm not going to go in debt for a 5-star Barbara, and generally speaking, I don't recommend pulling for her constellations, but I do want to cover them and explain why. Her C1 will give her more damage to the last hit of her normal attack combo. As you can see, when you're inside of her burst, the final normal attack will unleash a fish that deals 30% of her max HP as hydro damage. It's also not considered normal attack damage, so it won't be buffed by external sources that would normally buff your normal attacks. This is a pretty good increase in damage, especially when you're stacking HP to your normal attack combos. Her second constellation gives her more healing. Effectively, for characters that are under 50% HP, she will heal more. Her C3 and C5 increase your talent levels, which are whatever. And then her fourth constellation can be nice if you're auto-attacking, increasing your attack speed when you're inside of your burst, and regenerating a ton of energy for you. Every time Kokomi normal attacks, you will restore 0.8 energy, and it can occur every 0.2 seconds, meaning you can get a ton of energy since you auto-attack pretty fast with higher attack speed for the whole duration of your burst. Lastly, her sixth constellation is a damage increase. It will buff her DPS when, once again, she's inside of her burst, normal attacking and charge attacking. She will effectively gain 40% hydro damage bonus for 4 seconds whenever she heals or would heal any party member with 80% HP or more with her normal or charge attacks. That means you just need like a party member in your team that's healthy, high HP percent, 80% or more, and then you'll effectively just always have a 40% hydro damage bonus. The problem with this constellation though is that yes, it's expensive, but also the damage your Kokomi is going to be dealing isn't enough to justify the cost. Like, it's still going to be less DPS than just any meta DPS character, and like as a support, something like this won't really increase your team's damage that much, so I do not recommend pulling for this, but it does give you more damage. I also wanted to include a quick section on her animation cancels. If you'll notice, the last hit of her normal attack has a lot of delay. If I just spam auto attacks right here, you'll see the time between the third one and my next auto attack string did take quite a while. Something you can do, however, is animation cancel it by either dashing or jumping. I'll test it against a real enemy or to show it off to you guys a bit better, but basically after this third normal attack, you can jump, or you can even dash cancel it 1, 2, 3, and then dash while it's, the animation is going. And as you can see, it did do damage. But basically, if I do choose to animation cancel it, I can do 1, 2, 3, dash away, and then I can react much faster, do other things, swap characters, all that. Now, I did want to talk about Kokomi's Hydra application because it's something that is worth mentioning, and it's honestly pretty good. Even from off-field, with just Kokomi's elemental skill, she can keep up with many characters like Shangling's Pyronado, or like a freeze team to perma-freeze, or allow your Shangling to vaporize non-stop. To show you guys what I mean, I use my Kokomi's elemental skill here, swap out of her, use Shangling's Pyronado, and as you can see, Shangling is vaporizing every swing. It's Shangling who is getting the vaporizes, not Kokomi. As you can see, the vaporizes are proccing on Xiangling's Pyronado with just Kokomi's elemental skill from off field. This means that Kokomi as a support can use her skill, which will apply Hydro while you're on other characters, and then to refresh its cooldown before the skill is gonna end, you can swap back to Kokomi, use your burst, which will refresh the duration with that passive talent that we saw earlier, allowing you to effectively have 100% uptime and enable Hydro if you do choose to play Kokomi as an off-field support / healer. And since the scaling on her burst is honestly pretty low, this is how I recommend playing her as a support, to where you're not really using her burst for the auto attack damage. You can auto attack a bit to fill in any gaps in your rotation or to heal a bit more, but generally speaking, I like using this like Fischl's burst to reset Oz, reset your Kurage's duration, allowing you to constantly apply Hydro, Millilith, and healing. So now I want to get into a very important section, Kokomi's team comps. As I mentioned multiple times in this video, and as I wanted to be clear, she can be played in many different ways. If you want to use her as an enabler or on-field auto attacker, one of her best team comps is this one, a taser team. This taser team is basically one where Kokomi's going to be on-field, spamming auto attacks inside of her burst, while her off-field supports are the ones dealing an insane amount of damage, while Kokomi also, applies Hydro very fast, does a pretty okay amount of damage, and can even use Thrilling Tales to buff Beto's burst. Effectively, since Kokomi's attacking very fast and applying Hydro, it will allow Fischl's Oz to trigger on her normal attacks and deal some damage, and Beto's burst to also trigger, bounce between enemies on every normal attack, and deal massive amounts of off-field electro damage. This is a team comp that works well with characters like Sucrose or Child, who can enable them as well, and it's a team comp that works very well with Kokomi as well. On top of that, Kokomi acts as a healer in this team, where you don't need another one, especially because she's going to be on-field auto-attacking, her normal attacks will be healing your entire team. Lastly, the last character in this team is quite flexible. I recommend an Anemo unit, Kazuha being the best, to buff all of your damage. And he is a character who just in general synergizes very well with Kokomi because, he's a great unit overall. He gives you that elemental damage bonus to your Hydro and Electro in this case, and can utilize the Verdescent Venerer set to reduce the resistance of enemies. But the last character in this team is pretty flexible, and I do recommend an Anemo unit like Venti, Sucrose, Kazuha to take this slot. Other than that, playing a more supportive role as a healer and Hydro applier, who also gives you Thrilling Tales and Tenacity of the Millilith, Kokomi can fit many team comps, notably a freeze comp. This is an example team using Kaya and Rosaria as some quick swap carries, with Kokomi being a Hydro applier from off field. As you guys will see in the showcase, my Kokomi will allow my team comp to permanently freeze while my Kaya and Rosaria are doing all the damage. I don't even need to stay on Kokomi to auto attack. I'm just going to be quick swapping between my other characters, using their abilities on cooldown, while Kokomi's Jellyfish is permanently on field, constantly applying that Hydro and freezing enemies. Now this is just an example of cryo characters. She works in a lot of cryo teams. For example, or another example, is an Ayaka team, where you can use her once again as the Hydro applier. And while in this team I'd rather have someone like Xingqiu, she can work very well as a replacement for Mona, or an alternative to Mona in this team right here, a Morgana comp. So when you're running Ganyu with Venti, and typically it would be Mona, but if you don't have her, or as a replacement that's also a healer, you can run someone like Kokomi, which can be very good. Giving Thrilling Tales, Tenacity of Millilith, and apply Hydro enough to permafreeze is a very nice inclusion to this team. Lastly, since Kokomi is your healer, that allows the last slot to be very flexible and even allow you to run someone like Ayaka, whose burst will deal massive amounts of damage as well. So Kokomi can be viable in freeze comps as the Hydro applier from off field, and can also be an enabler on field in teams like the Taser one that we saw earlier. On top of that, since her Hydro application is pretty good, she can be ran with Xiangling, allowing your Xiangling to vaporize every hit of her Pyronado with Kokomi's Hydro application. And basically, while her normal attacks don't do the most damage, and a lot of people are underwhelmed by that, especially because she's a 5-star that you have to spend Primo Gems on, and is oftentimes replaceable with someone like Barbara, who's free, which is why I don't want to incentivize anyone to pull on her. The fact that she can apply Hydro reliably from off field, while healing a bit and giving you damage with Thrilling Tales and Millilith, makes her a viable option in many teams, especially because of how important Hydro is to enabling reactions like freeze or vaporize. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I want to get into a DPS showcase, or a showcase of Kokomi. I'm going to be using a Taser team, this one right here, that I recorded on my stream from testing Kokomi. I will also try to include some clips of like quick swap freeze maybe, but the main reason I'm using Taser is because it's a team where Kokomi actually gets to shine more. She's on field auto attacking, so I feel like most people would like to see that more than just pressing my skill and swapping. Also, in case you guys are wondering, my talents are only level 6, so I could be giving my Kokomi more investment. And in the footage, I am running Skyward Atlas with Heart of Depth to try to give her some damage. Although, as I mentioned in the weapon section, Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers would have been more optimal, but I felt like maximizing my Kokomi's damage herself, and also my Thrilling Tales is pretty low level, but it is still usually what I recommend. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the guide, and I hope you'll enjoy the showcase. Let's go.
between us. I can't focus, I can't forget. I've been thinking too much lately. I just need to clear my head. I just need to clear my head. I've been stuck on memory, but it's not like I need it. And you may have some history, but we don't have to repeat it. You made this mess and left me with the pieces. Now I'm gonna burn all the bridges between us. I can't focus, I can't forget. I've been thinking too much lately. I just need to clear my head. 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 I just need to. I just need to. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. Can't focus, I can't forget. I've been thinking too much lately. I just need to clear my. I just need to clear my head.
ソーランド行こうパーフェクト諦め
この瞬間お前は永遠をもみちが
海のちぎりよやっ
So overall, there are many different ways to play Kokomi, either as an on-field auto attacker or an off-field support where you're just applying hydro, giving your team attack buffs, and healing a okay amount. I know a lot of people complain about her healing being pretty low, and honestly it is, but usually it's enough to get through any content of the game, because generally speaking, you don't need that much healing unless you're doing like co-op or floor 11 where you'll need to invest more into her. That's about it though. I know this video took a while to make. I'm not like the first guide out there, but I really want it to be the most detailed one and most complete because a lot of people are rushing to conclusions. So I really hope this detailed guide was helpful. If there's anything I want to add, it will be in a pinned comment. So yeah, that's about it. If there's any questions you have, leave them in the comments down below. This video took a very long time to make. I mean, like since her Asia release, I've barely slept and I've just been working on this to make sure everything's correct. So please do like it if you enjoyed, sub if you're new, feel free to join the Discord, all that stuff. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
海のちぎりよ
Wait, so what's gonna happen?
二度とこのような過ちは
Why is that a thing?